Playing?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it.
Then take it.
Hey,
It's
what's
not my
going on,
wallet.
guys? It's Jack. Season 3 is almost here, and I've gone through each of the dungeons for the pool. I want to talk about what the dangers are going to be for next season, the dispel profiles, the healing profiles, and what is going to be killing you and your teammates to watch out for. The big thing I noticed with this dungeon pool is it's not that heavy on curses and poisons, but it's really the curses that I think stand out in just one of the dungeons in Halls of Atonement. When it comes
I do just want to point out, this was an absolute chaotic place. Like, it's probably going to be best to have a shaman for Cleanse Totem.
to dispels, it's not as brutal as it's been in the past, but there are some dungeons that are extremely overtuned and some that are actually really undertuned and feel like I barely need to be there as a healer. So let's dive into it, starting with Ecodome Aldani. And this dungeon is very cool with very fun boss fights and also some really deadly trash mobs. Still kind of the same vibe as like Sepulchre with some of those like harvesters that are sucking up like the void energy around. But what this really results in is trash pulls with huge amounts of AoE damage pretty much everywhere. Almost every single pull. The very beginning of the dungeon is going to feature kind of like a martyrdom dot. When the ads are dying, they're putting up a huge dot onto your team. So you need to make sure that you're readying your healing cooldowns after the pull is over, or if you're chaining pulls together, you're going to need to have some constant output as you go from one pack to another.
Correct me if I'm wrong, does it already look like with what he said with Halls and with this, that it's going to be a healer throughput season? Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, based on what I've heard, and what I've seen, it will be a healer throughput season. So your performance is going to depend on your healer mainly, your tank secondarily, and then your DPS thirdly.
I agree with that, because a lot of this, like, especially if he keeps going into like explaining how the ads are like actively making people lose health and like how much health they're losing and stuff like that, realistically. And like, also look at it down here, like, yes, the VDH is doing 2 mil, but like a brewmaster on, what is this, a 16 would probably be doing like 1.8, 1.7. So that just means the healer has to be doing 3, which in my opinion is not bad, especially for a 16. Like that,
Terrible.
like that makes sense, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start going to both the first and second boss fights, there's a tremendous amount of spot healing required. Most of the damage that's going to actually kill you on those two boss fights is prio target healing. The first boss is putting up 2 dots onto players when they drop off some puddles. The second boss is going to feature spears that are rooting and sort of tethering players into place. And while they're still under the effect of the spear, they take ramping damage. So you're going to need a lot of extra damage to help break them out, but you're also going to need to make sure you have a lot of single target healing to deal with that incoming effect. Now the trash, like I mentioned before, has some martyrdom effects, but there's also a lot of mechs after the first boss. And they put up this little shield onto themselves before you pull them. When you crack that shield, then they start like leaking and radiating energy, both dropping magic void zones at your feet and doing absurd amounts of damage. This is probably going to have to get nerfed going into the season because you have to move and mash healing like crazy all the time. And most of the trash pulls when you're fighting the mechs are kind of like assassins that are going to jump behind players and deal this unavoidable damage, or jump on top of players and deal some splash damage. So you're encouraged to spread, deal with the splash damage, and the more you spread, the more surface area you take up because of the mech, and the more movement that you have to do to move out of all of these puddles. It gets really chaotic really quickly throughout this dungeon. And interestingly enough,
Bruh, can we look at this damage done real quick? Marksman, 18.3. Frosty K, 13.2. Havoc, 13.1.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing a shit ton of damage next season, dude.
Yep.
each zone, or each time you kill one of the bosses, you kind of enter a different zone with a really different makeup of trash mobs. It's almost never like the same mobs that you're fighting all of the time. Beginning, you kind of fight some of these like void harvester
I'm gonna do laundry while we're doing
monsters.
this.
then you're fighting some of the ethereal, and then at the end, you're kind of just fighting a mix of ethereal and bugs. And the bugs, actually, you can kill pretty quickly. We did a couple different pulls where we were able to like kite around all these bugs all over the place and have them just be zombie mobs, basically. They weren't really like doing anything. They did a couple tank busters that put up a healing absorb on the tank, but if the tank could just kite him forever around some of the structures in the ruins, it made it ridiculously easy. There also are a couple...
Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
So, looks like I'm gonna have to figure out how to kite these bugs around in a circle.
different prio targets that DPS have to swap to like kill off some of the pylons or like shields that come up so that you can actually...
Oh yeah,
damage
this
the
is the
main
nasty
elite
pull.
mobs.
I hate
Those
this pull.
weren't too difficult to kill off as long as everything is in range. They kind of got cleaved down very quickly. But the last boss I'm a huge fan of because it basically shatters your soul so you can kind of see your character get shattered throughout the fight. And you need to go run and pick it up at a couple different points. If you pick it up, you're getting a damage buff, but if you do not pick it up, you get a crazy dot, a big haste down, and I believe also a damage down on top of it. So it's insanely brutal if you do not pick up your soul. And I'm a massive fan of these type of mechanics. Unfortunately, it also puts up a huge dot, so you might just have somebody not collect their soul, die to the dot, and be like, why? What happened, healer? When... it's going to take a lot for people to survive the first time they kind of go into that. So be ready on that one. Arakara returning once again.
Yeah, you hear that? You hear that? Let's go back. Let's have Jack say it again.
Arakara return.
Arakara.
You said Arakara. That's how you say it. Arakara. You say it wrong.
Alright, I'm gonna find somebody else saying
Face the
Arakara.
facts.
Never mind.
Returning once again for season 3.
I'll find somebody else say it that
you'll
way.
know this dungeon was all about really heavy AoE, particularly on the first boss with the eggs cracking open and new spiders awakening, the room filling up with webs, and all the nasty that is going to ensue there. That still holds true, but they've made the poisons really, really deadly at the beginning of the dungeon. The ones on the final boss, however, they've actually ended up nerfing. So your trash is going to be quite a bit harder. The boss fight gets a little bit easier at the end, but if you've played in Season 1, it's still a mess of chaos, making sure you root yourself, avoid the suck-in, and the resulting explosion. They've also made a couple of key changes throughout this instance. The beetles, the big swarm guards, they still reduce the damage taken by the group after you kill the first boss, but now, instead of doing frontals, they actually do mass AoE events. And so a huge amount of trash after that first boss is dealing a crazy amount of AoE damage constantly.
Ooh.
And there's only so many of these swarm guards that you're able to skip, so you're still going to have to fight quite a few. If you add that on top of the really large amount of party-wide damage heading towards the first boss and heading towards the final boss, this is one of the most consistent high AoE damage dungeons in the pool. Now, there are some bright sides to it. It feels a little bit lighter when it comes to casters compared to some of your other options in the dungeon pool, and it also feels like an area where healer damage can really shine. Since there's a lot of predictable mass AoE events that are easier to defensive, it makes it a lot easier for healer damage to particularly shine. And throughout my testing, I was actually using quite a bit of Voidweaver Disc going through this dungeon, and it felt like I was not running into any big problems because I constantly just had big AoE healing. And I think you could actually get away with having Voidweaver Disc be the optimal option for pushing in high keys instead of the Oracle subspec, because most of the dungeon, second boss notwithstanding, most of the dungeon is just mass AoE damage events. And when you get to the second boss, well, you've got Pain Sup, you've got Barrier, you've got Defensives. The spot healing isn't as deadly as you might see in some of the other dungeons. So Arakara, I think, is similar to where we were in Season 1, but the poisons are definitely overtuned, and I hope that they tweak it down a little bit on trash so it's not as frustrating when you don't have like Shaman around for poison dispels. Dawnbreak.
So that's gonna be a pretty simple key as long as you know how to use your defensives.
See that.
Well, let's keep her moving.
Breaker also got a couple minor tweaks to the dungeon, some little tuning on boss fights that make the dot feel a little bit harder on the first boss that you have to end up dealing with. But they've also made a really big change to the dungeon where the shadows that you're fighting around the church, the cathedral type area, they used to do this mass AoE event that you have to plan for and watch their mana and make sure you were ready to blast tons of output. They've completely removed that ability going into the next season.
Is it just
That
a frontal?
said, there is still a lot of dot damage. There is a lot of casters in here, especially ones that are sort of radiating party damage. Decent amount of bolts going on, and a lot of tank pressure that has to be dealt with. In addition to this, you can dispel the tanks to start removing some of their increased stacking debuffs. Same thing goes for Arakara as well. I neglected to mention, you have like the stacking slow at the end of Arakara that used to be undispellable. Now you can just use a magic dispel for it. Same thing was going on in Dawnbreaker with some of the heal downs. There's still more stacking dots and healing downs going out onto tanks, so it doesn't look like it's getting any friendlier for our tank players.
There's
a lot of dot damage when you're fighting mini bosses, but most of the bosses in Dawnbreaker are mass AoE. There's another area where I think that like Voidweaver Disc could get away with playing it at higher levels even, because there are really big pulls for a lot of trash density where the Entropic Rift would shine, but there's also not as many areas where you need a lot of focused single target healing, which would like prevent a spec like Voidweaver from shining. For all the other healers as well, I think it's important to note that the curses in this dungeon themselves are not super deadly. They weren't really dealing tremendous amounts of damage, and a lot of the pulls that you're having, you're putting a lot of emphasis on some of the crowd control for like the bolts, the tormenting blast. There still is like the Stygian Seed, like magic debuff that goes out that's really deadly as well. And you do have to have a lot of mass burst AoE regardless of what healer that you're playing.
So even still, it doesn't look like this is gonna be a super duper off the wall season.
Hard deal.
Like this...
Yeah, no. So go ahead.
No, you go. You go. I've been talking a lot.
The main thing I'm seeing here is season 1 kind of gave us a precursor for season 2. Season 2 is easier than season 1, in my personal opinion. Season 3 will be on par with season 2, but with a little bit of changes. We're not going to see that many, bumps in the road. Yes, there's going to be particular dungeons that we like over others. Arakara I do not like, personally, because of that third boss with the twins. Twins can go suck my dick. Especially when the soak circle ends up in the purple circles, and then you're fucked.
Yep.
Right, so there's no way you can bait those purple circles. It is literally RNG. It is literally the fact that you have to just deal with whatever the fuck the game gives you. Floodgate is Floodgate. I mean...
Let's see. Is Floodgate... Oh, Floodgate's literally the next one. So let's just watch Floodgate.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Is still an incredibly challenging boss, and the final boss as well is also just super high damage, similar to what we saw out of season 1. They haven't made some big changes onto those ones. The boss fights are still really deadly, and they've...
Bruh. Look at how much health Rashodon has.
Final boss as well is also
48 billion.
What the fuck?
This is on a 14. It's got 48 billion.
Oh, dog. We're about to see 11 billion, 12 billion as like the standard for tens. So
Echo. What's 48 billion divided by...
Sorry, I didn't get that. 48 billion divided
Jesus.
by what?
Never mind.
Cancelling.
you dumb
Echo.
fuck.
48 billion times 0.6.
48 billion times 0.6 is 28.8 billion.
Okay.
You're knocking 20 billion health off that. The boss's health is 20 billion.
also just
More.
super high damage, similar to what we saw out of season 1.
Well,
Haven't made some
Rashodon,
big
you
changes
you
onto
knock
those
it
ones.
from 100
Boss
to
fights
60.
Still really deadly.
Well, you also
They've
got to
only made a
think.
couple
Look at
little
the single
tweaks.
target damage.
Floodgate is
4
making a
mana.
return from season 2,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I'm really glad to see it. I think this is
29
one of my
mil
favorite
enhancement
dungeons of
shot.
the expansion thus far. There's a really good mix of damage patterns throughout the dungeon. Big Mama giving you some like burst AoE and damage vulnerability windows. Swamp Face giving you rot style encounters, which is ticking down for players with a couple bits of burst here and there to add a threat. And then you have the final boss, which is having both spot healing moments and burst AoE moments that you have to prepare for. It's a lot of different ways to challenge a healer, and I personally really enjoy that. They've done a little
really
bit of
enjoy
tuning
those
throughout
party
the
frames.
dungeon, but it doesn't feel super noticeable.
I
or
love how
super
smooth
different,
they
really,
are.
from what we saw out of season 2.
I want those
Still
party
have
frames.
to deal with like the shredders, for
I
example. They
don't,
still deal
because
with
I
a good
like
amount of
mine,
damage.
but I just
There's
want
still
them
quite a
to-
bit of caster mobs
I just want them
around
to
the dungeon
react
that are
better.
gonna need some
Like,
of
I
those
want
riot
that
kicks.
smoothness
They
when they
did
take damage.
reposition some mobs,
That's what I
namely
want.
The Blood Shaper,
I'm not saying
that is
I
by
want
Big
them
Mama
as
no
big,
longer
I'm just
exists, so you can kind of just walk
Whoa!
up, grab
Whoa!
Wait, what? Go ahead.
Check this poll.
dungeon
This
that
is
are
a
gonna use
nasty
those riot
poll.
kicks. They did reposition some mobs, namely the
So they took Soldier, Hyena, into boss
Blood Shaper that is by Big Mama no longer exists, so you can kind of
with the soldiers and the contractors.
just walk up, grab a bunch of extra
Ouch.
trash, pull it into Big Mama,
In
have
the
a great
boss.
time, and not have to worry about having that like pixel skip to
In a
make sure you're
15.
breaking out the canister and setting the bomb.
Yeah, that's why the enhancement shaman is doing 31 mil, the prot warrior is doing
No,
20
my-
mil, the fire mage is doing 10 mil, and Tettles is down on 1 mil.
Why is Tettles down on 1 mil though?
Probably because he needs time to ramp, and once the enhancement shaman pops Ascendance, it's big damage time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
Which
also,
is why
once the prot warrior hits demolish, it's big damage time.
I would like those unit frames. So the target frame and the player frame. Those look clean to me. I would want those. I don't know what they are, but I want them.
I want the thing that's in the middle, but we can talk about that in a little bit.
Bombs and everything while skipping the Blood Panda, Blood Shaper guy. You don't have to worry about that anymore, which is great, but you do still have to fight the one at the top of the stairs, kind of overlooking the dam before you fight Swamp Face. Speaking of Swamp Face, he honestly just kills poor Bubbles. I'll have a moment of silence for Bubbles.
Rest in peace,
But
Bubbles.
oh my god, I'm so glad, because it means that the skip after Swamp Face doesn't exist anymore. You don't brick your keys to missing that skip anymore whatsoever. Hallelujah. Feels freaking great. Floodgate's probably one of my favorite dungeons, I think, like I said, of the expansion. Glad to see it returning,
agree.
and I'm glad that they are not making it more frustrating in any ways. What does get a little bit more frustrating is the return of Priory.
This.
Now,
Yup.
they
Yep.
wanted to encourage some more like right side routing, and to do so, that means that you're pulling Tanner from high school in with the first boss. And Tanner is the one who's doing like
What?
firestorms, and he would cast a Cinder Blast where you would dispel the tank so that they don't get stunned, all those kind of things. Well, they removed the Cinder Blast, and they made it so that the Firestorm would not cast while the boss is doing his leap onto somebody and munching them. But they also changed the boss so that
Okay.
instead of throwing this like thin red line spear, he's throwing this Earthshaker spear that creates earthquakes on the ground. That also deals a lot of AoE damage, which can be really nasty if you're doing a left side route, because when you do a left side route, you have to fight the priest mob who's casting Holy Radiance and doing mass AoE. So what happens is she's doing her usual mass AoE, and instead of having the boss leap on somebody, and they've removed that combo, the boss will instead throw these Earthshaker spears and do mass AoE damage. So they kind of traded off one combo of mechanics for another, and it's something you still have to watch out for. We'll see if some of the PTR tuning is going to fix that, but that was like one of the first things that I bug reported and first things that I noticed throughout. Also, they only made the knights slightly easier to fight by reducing their dot damage, which I get it because you don't want somebody to die to the dot when his mass AoE shout goes out. But I feel like the mass AoE shout, when you are pulling it with like hunters that are doing, you know, uninterruptible shots, there's a lot of casters with their bolts and fireballs and smites, all of that other stuff. It's really, really irritating to have a huge mass AoE event and surprisingly no dot damage. You know, they changed Arakara, for example, to have more dot damage, which feels pretty good when you're fighting a whole bunch of caster mobs, because you can have people around 100%, they'll be 90, 95%, and so when you're doing your 10s and 12s, someone's not going to get one shot when the damage is going out and a bolt goes off. If you are preparing for healing, you'll usually be able to reverse that damage. But when you go to a dungeon like Priory, it's a huge mass damage event, and if somebody doesn't defensive it, they almost certainly will die.
That is an absolute fact. Like, that just needs to be said. Because
Absolutely.
even, like, in Priory now, like, if you don't use it offensive on the first pull, you're going down within the first 10 seconds. Like, you can't...
Dog, I will tell you, my, like, defensive rotation, once we get everything grouped up on the right side with Sullyman, in there, I will pop Nature's Visual, I will pop Bark Skin, and then just fucking go. And I will just, as needed, once the Nature's Visual runs out, I will then renewal as needed, bear form as needed, especially if there's a big ass defensive from Sullyman, I will go into bear form, no questions asked. Because if I don't, I'm dead.
Yep.
Period.
You'll learn that one.
From the AoE going off, plus a bolt or a hunter shot or something like that going out onto a player. Really super frustrating. What's more frustrating is they haven't done anything whatsoever to these paladin pools, and they also haven't changed the kamikaze explosion out of some of the risen dead at the end of the dungeon. So you still have two major sticking points for bricking your keys, being mass AoE that you can't do a great job preparing for unless you're in a really well-coordinated team, which is a fraction of this community, and there's no rant whatsoever. It's very strange. I think this dungeon would benefit massively from repurposing some of their mass damage effects to be a little bit lighter up front so people have some time to react, to respond. It's by far the burstiest dungeon we've seen of PTR testing, and a lot of different sticking areas that are frustrating, and you can just kind of die in a heartbeat, which is something I do not love at all. What I do feel a little conflicted about is Halls of Atonement returning. Now, I initially was super excited because it's a huge mass damage dungeon. There's a lot of AoE pulls. There's a lot of big trash mobs. But oh my god, this is probably the hardest.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. I will say right now, as a tank, I'm not doing this baby. I'm not doing this baby pull. This pull, I'm not doing. I'm doing the big boy pull every single time. And if I brick my key on Halls of Atonement, I don't care because it's Halls of Atonement and I need to do it. Here's the pull, and I will show you the pull.
Atonement returning. Now,
all of this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Initially was super excited because
and then you group it.
Nope. Drop down. 1, 2, 3. Oh. There's 2 down here. 4, 5, 6, 7. Double mini boss.
Mass damage dungeon.
That's a mini boss. That's a mini boss.
There's a lot of AoE.
Lost
you're
that.
You're fucking insane.
Watch this shit. Halls of Atonement. MDI.
I don't know. I've never ran Halls of Atonement, so I don't know. So
there we go. It's going to be no Warlock out of team name, but otherwise a very similar strategy with the Priest and the Frost Mage, a Rogue replacing the Warlock. So I would give the edge here to Evolving with that damage, but let's see if the Rogue is adding anything to team name strategy. You know, kind of finesse-wise, right? Pathing-wise, that is better than what Evolving can do. Here come these first pulls. They are so... Oh, no! Evolving have had a player go down. Their healer right on the first pull. That is really, really, really bad.
Yep. So that's those 2 ads here. Every single thing here. Every single thing here. The 2 from the top of the stairs. And I want to say everything from up here.
Bad news for them.
Yeah, they need to get him up there,
because
get him up, and Alice dropped incredibly low as he just now got rid of his necrotic stacks, but he's trying so hard to survive as the buff is already
that's
out.
Why I wish.
Now he had to probably
I
bumped
wish-
him early here.
I
because
wish
he
Shadow
had,
Priest was
went
gonna
down.
be in a good
so now
spot.
I'm not sure if Alex can even survive the rest of this, as Shello is ramping up his damage, but it's still gonna take a little while until the Strash goes down. He's just trying to kite a little bit here, but now Soda goes down too. Alex goes down. This might be a wipe. I don't think they can finish this off with so many dead players. Shello's still alive, but he can't be doing any damage as the mobs are just following him. I think they're trying to kite this out, but this is a disaster for Evolving from the get-go.
Oh no, and team name also having things be difficult, but have yet to have a death there. Players dropping to like 10% health, but being...
Can we just point this out?
For Evolving from...
This rogue is CCing everything. They're
Only the
over
rogue.
here. He's trying to come back over here. This rogue is keeping the kicks from going off, and he's vanishing and CCing shit.
the get-go.
Good on him.
Oh no, and team name also having things be difficult, but have yet to have a death there. Players dropping to like 10% health, but being saved from death. And look at the damage they've been able to put out with that Shadow Priest as well. Shadow Priest not having to donate a power infusion on the side of team name, whereas in Evolving it needs to go to Shella, and so able to do...
But anyway, yeah. So that's the first pull of Halls of Atonement.
Oh my god, this
Damn.
is probably the
At
hardest
least it's the
dungeon
first pool.
in the pool. And I thought it was going to be Priory until I did Halls. Now, they've changed some of the mobs, so they're stacking up a debuff on the tanks, reducing their armor, while you're fighting Gorgon Bears that
Why
put up really
played
nasty
so
bleeds,
fucking
which
bad.
are just as nasty as they used to be in Shadowlands. And at the same time, you're fighting the Shard of Halkias, and you're fighting a Collector, which puts up another magical effect that you want to dispel as well. This one has like this reddish void
Can we
effect
pause
that
this
gets
real
placed on a
quick?
player.
What up?
Let's talk about how big that tank frame is on the Bright. Why?
Oh, because he edited it.
It's gonna
No,
be
but
Priory
why?
until
Why
I
is
did
it so
Halls.
big?
Now,
Why does he? Why does oh?
Because he's trying to show all the debuffs and all the shit that happens from...
Okay.
they've changed some of the mobs, so they're stacking up a debuff on the tanks,
Armor
reducing their
corruption.
armor, while you're fighting Gorgon
Divine
Bears
shield.
that put up really nasty bleeds,
And then
which are just
damage
as nasty
gun.
as they used to be in Shadowlands.
So there's
and
the
at the same
bleed.
time, you're fighting the Shard of
There's a
Halkias,
remove
and
corruption
you're fighting
again.
a Collector, which puts up another magical effect that you want to dispel as well. This one
Backs.
has like this
Back to
reddish
one,
void effect
two.
that gets placed on a player. It's a dot, and the damage that's dealt to the player heals the Collector. So the Collector is going to really take a long time to die if you're not dispelling that and you're dispelling the tank instead. And also, you could have somebody get that Collector dot and get the curse from the, I think it's the Obliterator mobs, which when it expires just does a huge amount of damage and cleaves anybody nearby. So there's way too many dispels in this dungeon. It's actually ridiculous how many dispels there are in the dungeon.
Gonna be
And
a
I haven't
healer
even
check
gotten to the
rotation.
most insane parts yet either. It's the third boss where it has like the ghosts come down from the ceiling and you gotta like feed them into these canisters to make them go away. They added dots to that boss too for some strange reason. And so those dots, they don't ramp up in damage, but they still deal a ton. When the ghosts come out, they deal a ton of damage as well. And so you have a ghost come down, two players have dots, you have to choose which one to dispel and the other one which to spam heal, while mass spam healing everybody else. And they come out so frequently, the dots and the ghosts, that you are dispelling every 8 seconds on PTR right now,
Jesus.
no matter what. And within every 8-second window, you're also just spamming AoE healing. And if the tanks, because they
Bruh. Jack is at 4 mil healing on a 15.
That's brutal.
don't die to anything or want to have fun, they also pull trash onto bosses, and that trash will include collectors with that dot I just told you about. So, I'm spelling like 20-something times on a boss fight, fighting for everyone's lives, and it's certainly a boss fight. It's certainly a boss fight onto that one. The final boss, they I guess, better, more interesting, kind of the same. They've just added more visuals, more like swirlies to run out of. It makes it feel like there's more happening on the boss fight, but there really isn't. You dodge the statues, you make sure you soak the statues when he draws them into himself, and you basically just avoid frontals, avoid things that are gonna kill you. It's a pretty straightforward fight, and There's certain pieces of this dungeon that I just cannot fathom why they made changes to it. When they make like the third boss as insanely hard as they possibly can for the healer, and then the fourth boss, it's kind of like they put on a fresh coat.
They had to put a Candle King in there. Candle King is the third boss of halls.
Put a paint of like, oh look, stuff's happening. But in reality, it's just like a facelift, and the regular mechanics are kind of the same. First boss, the Halkias fight, feels pretty similar. I swear it's like a Mandela effect. I don't remember the swirlies going back and forth from Shadowlands, but everybody else seemed to, so I was not prepared the first time that happened to me. Whoa, what the? But watch out, because the spinning laser beams are going to turn around on you periodically, so be ready for that. To wrap us up, we've got both Tazvesh dungeons for the dungeon pool. On Streets, this one's super interesting because Streets was really not a super high damage.
So this one, to my knowledge, I should be pulling everything in this room.
Be ready for that. To wrap us up,
So
we've got
there are ads behind the POV right now that, to my knowledge, I should be taking.
both Tazvesh dungeons for the dungeon pool. On Streets, this
maybe
one's
not.
super interesting because Streets was really not a super high damage instance back in Shadowlands when they had it around, season 3, season 4, and it kind of still goes along that trend. A lot of the trash pulls are pretty low damage. There's a number of like low damage dots that'll like slow you. So classes that have Tiger's Lust, Freedom, Phantasm, anything that can remove snare effects, which are slow effects, not roots, but slows. They were able to remove these dot effects, these magical dot effects, so the dispel profile wasn't super brutal or anything along those lines. You will have quite a few moments with some of the bosses kind of like teaching people the mechanics once again. I really think about the Postmaster boss as one that everyone's going to have to get a little bit of experience with, both soaking the puddles, getting dispels for the puddles, soaking the big AoE, running the bomb suitcases into the chutes and getting those away. That'll take a couple pulls as people kind of get used to the mechanics, but that's something I very much expect. The mobs that are sort of surrounding the inner courtyard before you fight Soza, the final boss, those ones are still pretty nasty, and they still do a really high damage charge where they're going to charge out to a ranged player and basically just punch them, and it does a lot of damage. The best way to mitigate that is actually just to stack in melee. So regardless of your composition, you are just going to want to stack in melee when you have some of those elites that are charging at you in the courtyard, and by doing that, it actually feels like there's super insanely low damage.
Oh, you won't believe what the ad was called that charged at him.
Courtyard, and by doing
Market Peacekeeper. So, looks like we're gonna have Peacekeepers, which is so fun. So fun. You still good? You still good? Okay.
doing that, it actually feels like there's super insanely low damage. They changed the trading game, the barter game, to enter the club, and it made it feel like a little bit faster, which is always nice. They spawn ads more regularly and more consistently as you're doing the barter game, and it feels really, really quick. Still kind of like the get guided by the weak aura type stuff that you have to deal with. The Menagerie boss and the first boss also feel very similar to what we had before without any sort of major changes. And it really feels like at the moment, I don't want to advocate for more insanity in dungeons, especially after I just told you guys about Halls of Atonement, but it really feels like you could get away without a healer in a lot of key levels, like probably like 12 or 15s or something like that with Streets. If you have people who know what they're doing, or you have some like off healing or something, if you have like a prop alley meta or something returning, it feels like you don't really need a healer in a large amount of those areas. Definitely for the Postmaster, unless your group is insane. But other swaths of the dungeon, I mean, you could just set up like a high damage spec as a healer and just blast with how it's tuned at the moment. Gambit's kind of similar, but it gets more deadly as the dungeon progresses. The very beginning of the dungeon, it's all fun and games, really. A lot of Murloc pulls. They will drop this fish stick that'll start healing the Murlocs. If they're close by, the tank just kites them away. You keep on kiting, you kill the Murlocs. You have...
Oh, yeah. I'm really excited for Gambit. But, dog, I'm going to ask you to kill this thing. See this thing right here? That's the fish stick. Kill the fish stick.
have a great time.
Okay.
Having, what is it, Ursul's Vortex to make sure the ads don't run away because they'll eventually run in
Yep.
fear is always super important. Having some more grips. Rest in peace, A-Bomb Limb. That would have been really helpful for this area as well. Let's keep all the ads in together. They usually melt pretty quickly. The first boss, if you only experienced
Bob.
Gambit when it first came out, you had to have somebody click a console on that boss and then tell everybody where to go. Well, they changed that in Shadowlands. I think it was like the end of Shadowlands. So that all you have to do is click the console and then everybody can see the colors. You find out where the colors need to be positioned on the side consoles, and then you're going to be good to go. Going into the second boss, having to fight the pirate dragon, this one they did make some changes to. There is a ramping dot, and there's 2 magical debuffs that go out. And it's a ramping dot that when you dispel it, it also deals a big amount of AoE damage. So this is also really insane. It makes the fight super hard because all the healer can really focus on is dispelling, topping everyone off. You have about 5 or 6 seconds after you dispel and top everybody to get your next dispel, top everybody once again, and then 8 seconds later your dispel comes off cooldown, and what do you know? Another round of magic dispels are going out.
So, yeah, Gambit's gonna be fun. I like Gambit, but they made this boss essentially workshop.
Right.
Because it's the second boss of Workshop, where it's like, okay, not the LOS thing, but debuff, and then you dispel the debuff, and then next thing you know, you have AoE damage, so then it's like, oh great, what else am I going to do besides just heal everybody back up and then keep it moving, you know? Alright, let's keep going.
There's really no winning. There's really no getting ahead of these magic dots. They're way too high damage, and they are very overtuned. And it makes it so the healer can only really focus on just trying to keep health bars alive. And so if the tank or DPS are not working on getting any of the sailors pushed into the boss's frontal, you are going to have a hellish time on this boss. So a lot of pressure on the healer and a lot of pressure on the entire group to make sure you're dealing with these pirates to get them killed off quickly, effectively. And if you don't, you basically just insta-wipe. The boss goes like 0 to 100 incredibly quickly. They did add some more indicators, specifically for when you were getting some of like the sword throws that go out into players. Those big red circles that you see on people deal a ton of damage, so you want to make sure you're not standing in them or not stacking them on top of other people. The end of the dungeon is actually where you have a lot more danger from trash, and this is where you have casters that'll heal themselves with Revitalize, cast bolts, and then periodically cast an unstable rift, which will wipe the group if the cast goes off. Very strange to keep that much caster junk, I guess you could call it, in the final boss room instead of kind of toning some of those things down, especially after all the issues we had in like Grim Batol earlier this expansion. I really wish that they would tone this area down and kind of address it a little bit better. I do like that they've still kept the like solar sparks that are spawned by some of the like lieutenants at the very end. You spawn this orb and you basically have to kill it off as it radiates damage. Those are always kind of cool, and I don't really mind those because, especially as a healer, if you have some single target damage to laser them down, that can actually be more effective than trying to heal through them. The final boss is really just a similar like web of mechanics, having to drag in ads, get them kicked, AoE them down, making sure you're drawing like the lines so that you're able to break the stars that are putting up a shield onto the boss. Lots of dodging for the swirlies that are going to be going out. It becomes quite a mess very quickly, but it's still like a very fun and like epic looking encounter. So Tazvesh is fun, but I think in general, both of these dungeons are very imbalanced, with some areas that are super tough and some areas that it feels like there's not really much of anything going on besides just mass AoEing a bunch of zombie mobs down. So I know a lot of the Shadowlands dungeons didn't do a fantastic job of like consistently challenging the healer with damage mechanics. I think there was a lot of dungeons in the Shadowlands pool that were like, hey, if you kick, you have like almost no damage, so go bring a healer that does the most DPS. This was a direct reason that we saw like Mists, when it came back into the dungeon pool in season 1, actually got a lot of buffs and was made much harder because they realized there was not that much reliable, unavoidable AoE that's happening. What I'm kind of worried about in this dungeon pool, they've almost forgotten, I would argue. They've almost forgotten about what it was like having to deal with this mass AoE, and they're like, oh, well, like, they have bolts, like, let's just keep those mechanics. People like those dungeons back in the day, let's just keep all these kicks. and I feel like it's just the wrong direction to kind of go into. Priory as well. It seems like they didn't really learn a lot from the struggles of Priory, and
That is a very good point. Because we had so many fucking struggles over the past, like, what? 2 months? 3 months of Priory? Where it's just the same bullshit. If you miss a kick, you miss a stop, everybody's dead. Or all of the mobs that were at, like, 20% health are now instantly back up to, like, 100, 90. You know what I mean? You with me? Matt?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure you were still with me. I was talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any opinion?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
the things that would actually kill people are these instant 100-0 type damage events or combo damage events where bolts go off at the same time an unavoidable hit goes off, and it's very, very difficult, especially when you're in a pug group, to keep everybody alive when most people don't use defensives until it's almost too late. And when it's only one big mass AoE event, it makes it super, super difficult to survive. And I think they actually, ironically, did the right thing in Arakara, making the beetles do dot damage and do very big visual AoEs for when they're going to do it, so it's actually easier to prepare. So I don't know if it's different people working on the design at Blizzard, but I wish they would do more of Arakara, where it's well projected, it maybe even ramping damage or just consistent damage or pulsing damage, not these like big AoE explosions that 100-0 players. I think we've seen plenty of those over the years, and I would really love to have a season where those are tuned to a minimum, rather than having them in almost every dungeon, which helps encourage a disc meta. And it could still happen even if there was rot damage, but it certainly becomes more likely that absorbs have higher value when, if you increase the effective health, there's a greater chance people don't die to these one-shots or these near one-shot type effects. So that's been my experience so far on PTR. My bonus final note is they also did not like and subscribe to this video, and I would really encourage you guys to do that. But also, they made changes to PTR where they gave everyone like maxed out avoidance gear, and I am turbo concerned that that is going to result in bad things happening to the tuning of the dungeons. I think they're going to not...
I agree with Jack. 'Cause I have a really good feeling people are going to be looking for avoidance turret and then just taking that over anything else. And that's kind of what Shadowlands kind of felt like, where everything was getting an avoidance turret or getting like a speed turret, and then you were trying to like get that gear over the stat prio gear.
Not realize that people are not dying to these AoE events because they have 20% damage reduction for every AoE hit, and then people are going to go walk into the 8s and 10s at the beginning of a season and just get obliterated. So there's my key warning for you guys. Keep an eye out for it. Big love to our patrons for making all this content possible.
Love it. All right.